David had always been the kind of person who questioned everything. At 42, he worked as a night shift security guard at a small tech company. But his real passion was astronomy. Every clear night, he would set up his telescope in his backyard, searching the stars for something extraordinary. He never expected that extraordinary thing to literally fall from the sky. It was a Tuesday night in October when his life changed forever. David was adjusting his telescope when he heard a loud crash from the woods behind his house. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard before, like metal scraping against rock, followed by complete silence. His first thought was that a small plane had crashed, so he grabbed his flashlight and rushed toward the sound. What he found in the small clearing wasn't a plane at all. There was a strange, silver object about the size of a small car, partially buried in the dirt. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before, smooth, with no visible seams or windows. But what really caught his attention was the figure lying motionless beside it. The person appeared to be a man, tall and lean, wearing clothes that looked like they were made from some kind of metallic fabric. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hair was an unusual shade of silver. David's first instinct was to call for help, but something stopped him. This didn't look like any accident he had ever seen. As he approached carefully, the stranger's eyes opened. They were the most striking blue David had ever seen, almost glowing in the darkness. The man tried to sit up but winced in pain when he spoke. His voice was soft and had an accent David couldn't place. "Please," the stranger said, "I mean no harm. My vessel, it's damaged beyond repair." David knelt beside him, his mind racing. Vessel? Who talks like that? But looking at the crashed object and the man's unusual appearance, a crazy thought began to form in his mind. Are you from somewhere else?" The stranger looked at David for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, he nodded slowly. "My name is Kieran. I come from a place very far from here. My ship was damaged during what you might call a storm in space. I had to make an emergency landing." David felt his world shift. Everything he thought he knew about the universe suddenly seemed small and limited. But, surprisingly, he wasn't scared. Instead, he felt excited. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "You're hurt," David said, noticing that Kieran was holding his left arm strangely. "Let me help you." Over the next few hours, David helped Kieran back to his house. The alien was weak and clearly in pain, but he insisted that his injuries weren't serious. As David cleaned and bandaged a cut on Kieran's arm, he noticed that the blood wasn't quite the same color as human blood. It had a slightly blue tint to it. "I know this must be shocking for you," Kieran said as David worked on my world. "We have studied many planets, but we rarely make contact with other species. I wasn't supposed to be here." David looked up from the bandage. "What were you supposed to be doing?" "Exploring," Kieran replied. "I'm what you might call a scout. I travel to different worlds, studying them from a distance. But something went wrong with my ship's navigation system. I ended up much closer to your planet than intended." As the night wore on, David learned more about his unexpected guest. Kieran came from a world called Ethros, which was located in what humans would call the Andromeda Galaxy. His people had developed technology that allowed them to travel between stars, but they rarely interfered with other civilizations. "We believe that every species should develop at its own pace," Kieran explained. "Contact too early can cause more harm than good." David was fascinated by every word. He had spent his whole life wondering if there was other intelligent life in the universe, and now he had the answer sitting in his living room. As dawn approached, David realized they had a serious problem. "What are you going to do now? Can you contact your people?" Kieran's expression grew sad. "My ship's communication system was completely destroyed in the crash. Even if I could repair it, the damage to the main engine means I can never leave your planet. I'm stranded here." David felt a wave of sympathy for this being who was now trapped millions of miles from home. "What does that mean for you?" "It means I will live out the rest of my days on Earth," Kieran said simply. "I will need to find a way to blend in with your society, to create a new identity for myself." That's when David made a decision that would change both their lives. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I can help you. You can stay here while you figure things out." Kieran looked surprised. "You would do that for a stranger, for someone who isn't even from your world?" David thought about it for a moment. His life had been pretty lonely since his wife passed away 5 years ago. He had no close family, few friends, and spent most of his time alone with his telescopes and books. Having someone around, even someone from another planet, might be exactly what he needed. "Yeah," David said with a smile. "I think I would." Over the following weeks, David and Kieran developed a routine. During the day, while David slept after his night shifts, Kieran would explore the house and property, learning about Earth culture. Through books, television, and the internet in the evenings, they would sit together and talk for hours. Kieran was incredibly intelligent and curious about everything. He asked endless questions about human society, relationships, emotions, and customs. In return, he shared stories about his home world and the other planets he had visited. He told David about cities that floated in the clouds, oceans that were made of liquid crystal, and creatures that could change their shape at will. But it wasn't just the stories that drew David to his new friend. Kieran had a gentleness about him that was rare. He was patient, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in understanding not just how things worked, but why they mattered to people. "Your species is fascinating," Kieran said one evening as they sat on the back porch, looking up at the stars. "You have such strong emotions, such passion for life. On my world, we are more controlled. We make decisions based on logic and reason. But humans make decisions based on love, hope, fear, dreams. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." David laughed. "I never thought of it that way. Most of the time, I think we're just stumbling around trying to figure things out." "But that's exactly what makes you wonderful," Kieran replied. "You try, even when you don't know what you're doing. You love, even when it hurts. You hope, even when things seem impossible." As the months passed, David began to see Kieran not as an alien visitor, but as a true friend. They developed inside jokes, shared meals, and even started working together on small projects around the house. Kieran's advanced knowledge of physics and engineering proved incredibly useful, and he helped David design and build several innovative devices. David said one day as they worked on a new type of solar panel that Kieran had designed. "We could probably make some money with these inventions." Kieran looked interested. "Money would be useful for maintaining my cover story, and it would allow me to contribute to our household instead of being a burden." "You're not a burden," David said firmly. "Your family." The word surprised them both. But as David said it, he realized it was true. Kieran had become the brother he had never had, the friend who understood him better than anyone else ever had. That night, as they sat under the stars, once again, David realized that finding Kieran had been the best thing that had ever happened to him. For the first time in years, he wasn't lonely. He had purpose, companionship, and a friend who saw the world in ways that constantly amazed him. "Thank you," Kieran said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "For what?" "For giving me a home when I lost everything. For accepting me when I'm so different from you. For showing me what friendship really means." David smiled, looking up at the vast universe above them. "Thank you for showing me that we're not alone out here, and for proving that friendship really can cross any distance, even the space between stars." Neither of them knew that their friendship was about to become even more complicated, or that love would soon enter their lives in ways they never could have imagined. 3 years had passed since Kieran crashed into David's life, and their friendship had grown stronger than either of them could have imagined. They had successfully created new identities for Kieran, with David helping him get proper documentation through a friend who worked in government records. To the outside world, Kieran was now a foreign researcher studying advanced physics, which wasn't entirely untrue. Their small inventions had turned into a profitable business. Kieran's knowledge of advanced science, combined with David's practical engineering skills, had created several breakthrough technologies that they patented and sold to larger companies. They were now comfortable financially, but more importantly, they had found a rhythm to their lives that worked perfectly. Everything changed on a sunny Tuesday afternoon when David convinced Kieran to join him for coffee at the local university cafe. David had been encouraging his friend to get out more and meet people, thinking that Kieran needed more social interaction than just their evening conversations. "I don't understand why you insist on this," Kieran said as they walked across the campus. "I'm perfectly content with our arrangement because," David replied, "you need to experience more of what Earth has to offer. You've been here 3 years, and you've barely talked to anyone besides me." Kieran was about to respond when he stopped walking completely. Across the courtyard, sitting alone at a table with books scattered around her, was a woman reading intently. She had long, dark hair that caught the sunlight, and even from a distance, there was something about her that drew Kieran's attention. "Who is that?" Kieran asked quietly. David followed his friend's gaze and smiled. "That's Dr. Isabella Rodriguez. She's a biology professor here. Specializes in the study of life forms that might exist on other planets. Pretty ironic, right?" Kieran didn't respond. He was transfixed, watching as Isabella turned a page in her book and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was such a simple gesture, but something about it made Kieran's heart race in a way he had never experienced before. "Are you okay?" David asked, noticing his friend's unusual behavior. I don't know," Kieran replied honestly. "I feel strange, like something important is happening, but I don't understand what." David looked at his friend's face and immediately understood. Having been married himself, he recognized the signs. "Oh boy," he said with a grin, "you're attracted to her." "Attracted?" Kieran repeated the word like it was foreign to him. "On my world, we don't experience emotions the same way humans do. We choose our life partners based on compatibility and shared goals. But this feels different." "That's because it is different," David said gently. "What you're feeling is what humans call falling in love. It's not logical or planned. It just happens." Over the following weeks, Kieran found himself returning to the university cafe every day, always bringing a book or newspaper as an excuse. He would sit at a nearby table and steal glances at Isabella while she worked. David teased him about it, but he was also concerned. He knew that any relationship would be complicated by Kieran's true identity. Isabella, meanwhile, had begun to notice the handsome stranger who seemed to appear whenever she was studying. She was naturally curious about people, and there was something intriguing about this man who always seemed to be reading scientific journals in languages she couldn't identify. One afternoon, when Isabella was struggling with a particularly heavy stack of books, Kieran couldn't help himself. He approached her table and offered to help. "Thank you," Isabella said, looking up at him with warm brown eyes. "I'm Isabella." "Kieran," he replied, and when she smiled, he felt that strange fluttering in his chest again. "You're not from around here, are you?" Isabella asked, noting his slight accent. "Your name sounds Irish, but you don't quite sound Irish." Kieran had practiced his cover story many times, but somehow, looking into Isabella's eyes, he almost forgot it. "I'm from very far away," he said, which was technically true. "I'm here doing research." "What kind of research?" Isabella asked, genuinely interested. "Physics, specifically. The possibility of life existing in other parts of the universe." Isabella's eyes lit up. "Really? That's fascinating. I study the same thing, but from a biological perspective. I spend my time trying to figure out what kinds of life forms might be able to survive in different environments." As they talked, Kieran was amazed by Isabella's intelligence and passion. She spoke about her work with such enthusiasm that he found himself completely captivated. More importantly, she seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts and opinions, Isabella said as their conversation continued. "You have some really unique perspectives on this stuff. Have you published any papers?" Kieran realized he was in dangerous territory. "I prefer to keep my research private for now," he said carefully. Their friendship developed slowly over the next few months. Isabella would save a seat for Kieran at her usual table, and they would spend hours discussing science, philosophy, and life in general. Kieran was amazed by how different she was from the people. On his home world, she was curious about everything, passionate about her beliefs, and had a way of seeing beauty in the smallest things. David watched his friend's transformation with a mixture of happiness and worry. Kieran was becoming more human-like in his expressions and mannerisms. But he was also becoming more conflicted about his secret. "I don't know what to do," Kieran confided to David one evening. "I think I'm falling in love with her, but how can I build a relationship on lies?" "Maybe you don't have to lie," David suggested carefully. "Maybe you could tell her the truth." Kieran looked at his friend like he was crazy. "David, I'm an alien from another galaxy. People don't just accept that kind of information." "Isabella isn't just people," David pointed out. "She's a scientist who has dedicated her life to studying the possibility of extraterrestrial life. If anyone could handle the truth, it might be her." As winter approached, Kieran and Isabella's relationship deepened. They began spending time together outside of the university, going for walks, attending lectures, and sharing quiet dinners. Isabella found herself drawn to Kieran's gentle nature and his unique way of looking at the world. There was something almost otherworldly about him, but she attributed that to his foreign background. One snowy evening, as they walked through the campus together, Isabella stopped and turned to face Kieran. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "Of course. Sometimes when you talk about space and other worlds, you sound like you're talking about places you've actually been, like you're remembering them instead of imagining them." Kieran's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "I mean, most people talk about alien life in theoretical terms, but you talk about it like it's real, like you know it's real." Kieran looked into Isabella's eyes and saw not suspicion, but curiosity and hope. In that moment, he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Isabella," he said quietly, "what if I told you that extraterrestrial life isn't just possible? What if I told you it's standing right in front of you?" Isabella stared at him for a long moment, and Kieran prepared himself for her to laugh or walk away. Instead, she stepped closer. "Then I would say that I've been hoping to hear those words my entire life," she whispered. The next few hours were unlike anything either of them had ever experienced in the privacy of David's house. Kieran told Isabella everything. He showed her items from his crashed ship, explained his biology and the differences between his species and humans, and answered every question she had. Isabella listened with the fascination of a scientist and the open heart of someone who had found something she had been searching for without even knowing it. When Kieran finished his story, she sat quietly for a long time. "So," she finally said, "you're telling me that the man I've been falling in love with is actually from another galaxy?" "Yes," Kieran said nervously. Isabella smiled. "That's either the most elaborate pickup line in history or the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me." "Which do you think it is?" Kieran asked. "Well," Isabella said, reaching out to take his hand, "considering that I've spent my whole career looking for proof that we're not alone in the universe, I'd say it's the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me." David watched from the doorway as his best friend and the woman he loved embraced, knowing that their lives were about to become infinitely more complicated, but also infinitely more wonderful. As the snow continued to fall outside, three people sat together in a small house, bound by friendship, love, and the amazing truth that the universe was far more beautiful and connected than any of them had ever dared to imagine. 5 years had passed since Kieran and Isabella's wedding, and their life together had been everything they could have hoped for. They had moved into a beautiful house on the outskirts of town, where Isabella could continue her research while Kieran worked on developing new technologies with David. Their marriage was built on complete honesty and trust, something rare in any relationship, but especially meaningful given their unique circumstances. David had become like family to both of them. He was the best man at their wedding, the person they called when they needed advice, and the one who helped them maintain their secret from the rest of the world. The three of them had created their own little family, bound together by friendship, love, and the amazing truth they shared, Isabella had never been happier. Her research had advanced significantly with Kieran's help, though she was careful to never publish anything that might raise suspicions about her sources. She was finally able to study actual extraterrestrial biology, even if she couldn't share that fact with the scientific community. More importantly, she had found a love deeper than anything she had ever imagined possible. Kieran, too, had found peace with his life on Earth. While he sometimes missed his home world, he had built something beautiful here. He had a loving wife, a best friend who was like a brother, and meaningful work that helped advance human understanding of the universe. He had learned to appreciate the simple pleasures of Earth life: morning coffee with Isabella, long conversations with David, and quiet evenings under the stars. But lately, something had been wrong. It started with small things that Kieran tried to ignore. He would feel tired after activities that normally energized him. Sometimes he would zone out in the middle of conversations, his mind going blank for several seconds. His usually perfect memory began to have gaps, and he would forget details that should have been easy to remember. "Are you feeling okay?" Isabella asked one morning as she watched Kieran struggle to remember where he had put his research notes. "I'm fine," Kieran replied, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Just tired, I think." Isabella, with her scientific mind, began to notice patterns. Kieran's symptoms seemed to be getting worse over time, not better. He was having trouble concentrating on complex problems that used to be easy for him. His coordination was slightly off, and sometimes he would stumble or drop things for no apparent reason. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Kieran collapsed in their living room. Isabella was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard a loud crash. She rushed into the living room to find Kieran unconscious on the floor, his body convulsing slightly. Panic filled her chest as she knelt beside him, her medical training kicking in automatically. "Kieran, can you hear me?" she called, checking his pulse and breathing. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Kieran's eyes opened. He looked confused and disoriented, as if he didn't recognize where he was. "Isabella?" he said weakly. "What happened? You collapsed," Isabella said, trying to keep her voice calm. "How do you feel now?" Kieran tried to sit up but felt dizzy. "I don't remember falling. I was just reading, and then nothing." That night, Isabella called David and asked him to come over immediately. When he arrived, he found both of them sitting at the kitchen table. Isabella with tears in her eyes and Kieran looking pale and shaken. "We need to talk," Isabella said. "Something is seriously wrong with Kieran, and I need to examine him properly." Over the next few hours, Isabella conducted the most thorough medical examination of her life. She tested Kieran's reflexes, his cognitive functions, and his basic physical responses. What she found terrified her. "Your cellular structure is different from humans," Isabella said, her voice shaking slightly. "I always knew that, but now I'm seeing changes. Your cells are breaking down somehow." Kieran and David exchanged worried glances. "What does that mean?" David asked. Isabella pulled up her research on her computer, showing them microscopic images she had taken of Kieran's blood samples over the years. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "These are your cells from 3 years ago. They're perfectly structured, unlike anything I've ever seen. But look at this sample from today." The difference was obvious even to David's untrained eye. The cells in the recent sample looked damaged, with irregular shapes and what appeared to be holes in their structure. "It's like your body is slowly poisoning itself," Isabella continued. "But I don't understand why." Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his superior intellect working through the possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with realization. "It's the environment," he said quietly. "Earth's atmosphere, the radiation from your sun, even the gravity. My body was designed for a completely different world. But you've been fine for 8 years. David protested. "Why would this be happening now?" "Because the damage is cumulative." Kieran explained. "Every day I've spent on Earth, my body has been slowly deteriorating. I just didn't notice it at first because the changes were so gradual." Isabella felt like the world was spinning around her, So what does this mean? Can we fix it? For the next 3 months, Isabella threw herself into research like never before. She consulted with medical experts under the guise of studying a rare genetic condition. She experimented with different treatments, trying to find ways to slow or reverse the cellular damage. David helped by researching any possible technological solutions, wondering if they could somehow recreate the conditions of Karen's home world. But deep down, they all knew they were fighting a losing battle. Karen's condition continued to worsen. His episodes of confusion became more frequent, and he began experiencing physical weakness that made it difficult for him to work. The brilliant mind that had once effortlessly solved complex problems now struggled with basic calculations. "I'm scared," Isabella admitted to David one evening while Karen was sleeping. "I'm losing him, and there's nothing I can do to stop it." David put his arm around her shoulders. "We're going to find a way," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. As Karen's health declined, he began to face the reality of his situation. He had always known that living on Earth might have consequences, but he had never imagined it would cost him his life. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had found everything he had ever wanted on this planet, only to discover that the planet itself was slowly ending his existence. One clear night, as the three of them sat on the back porch looking up at the stars, Karen made a decision that would change all their lives. "I need to tell you both something," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I know what's happening to me, and I know there's no way to stop it." Isabella started to protest, but Kieran held up his hand. "Please, let me finish," he said gently. "I've accepted what's coming, but I need to make sure that both of you will be okay when I'm gone." "Don't talk like that," David said firmly. "We're not giving up." "I'm not giving up either," Kieran replied, "but I'm being realistic. And because I love you both more than anything in this universe, I need to start making preparations." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. "What kind of preparations?" Kieran looked at his wife and his best friend, the two people who had made his time on Earth the most meaningful period of his existence. "I need to make sure you'll both be taken care of. I need to make sure our work continues, and I need to make sure that what we've built together doesn't die with me." That night, as Isabella slept fitfully beside him, Kieran stared up at the ceiling and began planning for a future he wouldn't be part of. He thought about the wealth they had accumulated, the research they had conducted, and the love they had shared. Most importantly, he thought about the promise he had made to himself to protect the two people who meant everything to him. He had no idea that his plan would challenge every convention of both Earth and his home world, or that it would test the bonds of love and friendship in ways none of them could have imagined. The universe, it seemed, had one more surprise in store for all of them. The winter months had been brutal. Kieran's condition was deteriorating faster than any of them had expected. What had started as occasional confusion and fatigue had progressed to days when he could barely get out of bed. His one sharp mind, which had effortlessly grasped complex scientific concepts, now struggled to follow simple conversations. Isabella had taken a leave of absence from the university to care for her husband full-time. She spent her days researching potential treatments and her nights sitting by Kieran's bedside, holding his hand and talking to him about their memories together. David visited every day after work, bringing groceries, helping with household tasks, and providing emotional support for both of them. Despite everything, Kieran still had moments of clarity. During these brief periods, his personality would shine through, and he would joke with David or share tender moments with Isabella. But these moments were becoming rarer, making them even more precious. On a quiet Thursday evening in February, Kieran called both Isabella and David to his bedside. His eyes were clearer than they had been in weeks, and there was a determination in his voice that they hadn't heard in months. "I need to talk to you both about something important," he said, struggling to sit up straighter in bed. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I need you to hear me out completely before you say anything." Isabella and David exchanged worried glances. They could see the effort it was taking for Kieran to focus and speak clearly. "I know my time is running out," Kieran continued. The doctors can't help me because they don't understand what's wrong. You've both tried everything possible, and I love you for that. But we need to face reality. Kieran, please don't, Isabella started, but he held up a weak hand. Let me finish, my love. This is important. He took a shaky breath. I've spent the last few months making arrangements, legal documents, financial planning. All the things that humans do when they know their time is limited. David leaned forward. What kind of arrangements? Kieran reached into the drawer beside his bed and pulled out a thick folder. Everything is in here. My will, trust documents, business papers. I've left detailed instructions for everything. Isabella felt her heart breaking all over again. The fact that Kieran had been planning for his death, while she was still desperately searching for a cure, made everything feel more real and final. Most of our wealth goes to both of you, Kieran explained. David, you've been like a brother to me. The business we built together, all the patents, the investments, half of everything is yours. You've earned it, and you deserve security for the rest of your life. David felt tears welling up in his eyes. Kieran, I don't care about the money. I just want you to get better. I know, Kieran said softly, but I need to know you'll be okay when I'm gone. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You became my family when I was alone. This is the only way I can repay that kindness. He turned to Isabella, taking her hand in both of his. Isabella, my beautiful wife, you gave me something I never thought I could have. You showed me what love really means. You accepted me for who I truly was. And you made every day on this planet worth living. Isabella was crying openly now. You don't have to do this. We still have time. We can keep trying to find a solution. We both know that's not true, Kieran said gently. And that's why I need to tell you about the most important part of my will. He paused, gathering his strength for what he knew would be a difficult conversation. In my culture, when a man dies, his closest friend becomes responsible for his wife's well-being. It's an ancient tradition, meant to ensure that no one is left alone and unprotected. David and Isabella both stared at him, not understanding where this was going. I know it sounds strange to human ears, Kieran continued. We don't see it as ownership or control. It's about family, about making sure the people you love are cared for by someone you trust completely. Kieran, what are you saying? Isabella asked, though she was beginning to understand. I'm saying that I want David to take care of you when I'm gone. Not just financially, but emotionally. I want you to take care of each other. The room fell completely silent. David felt like he couldn't breathe. Isabella looked stunned. I know how this sounds, Kieran said quickly. I'm not asking you to fall in love or get married or anything like that. I'm asking you to be there for each other, to not let grief and loneliness destroy the beautiful people that I love. David finally found his voice. Kieran, I can't take your wife. That's not how things work here. You're not taking me, Isabella said quietly, still processing everything. I'm not property to be passed from one person to another. Of course you're not, Kieran agreed. You're a brilliant, independent woman who can take care of herself. But you're also someone who has spent the last 5 years sharing your life completely with another person. I know how lonely you're going to be. He looked back and forth between them. I've watched you together for 8 years. I've seen how much you respect each other, how much you care about each other. You're already family in every way that matters. Isabella wiped tears from her cheeks. So you want us to what, exactly? I want you to not be alone, Kieran said. Simply, I want David to make sure you eat properly when you're too sad to cook. I want you to make sure David doesn't isolate himself when he's grieving. I want you to continue our research together. I want you to travel and see the world and experience all the things that make life beautiful. David was shaking his head. Kieran, this is crazy. I can't replace you. I'm not asking you to replace me, Kieran replied. I'm asking you to be yourself. The loyal, caring, wonderful friend that you've always been. The only difference is that I won't be here anymore. Over the next several hours, they talked about Kieran's wishes in detail. He had thought through every aspect of his plan, from the practical matters of managing their shared wealth to the emotional challenges they would face. I know this goes against everything you've been taught about relationships and marriage, Kieran said as the conversation continued. But I also know that love comes in many forms. The love between friends can be just as powerful and meaningful as romantic love. Isabella was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything Kieran had said. Finally, she spoke. On your world, do women have any say in these arrangements? Kieran smiled weakly. On my world, this conversation would involve all three people equally. No one is forced into anything. It only works if everyone agrees willingly. And if we don't agree, David asked, then you don't agree. Kieran said, I can't force you to care about each other, but I can ask you to consider it. I can tell you that it would give me peace to know that you're looking out for each other. As the night wore on, they continued discussing the details of Kieran's plan. He had set up trust funds, established legal guardianship arrangements, and even written letters for them to read after he was gone. There's one more thing, Kieran said as dawn began to break outside. Our research. Everything we've learned about my species and my world, I want you to continue that work together. Someday, when the time is right, that knowledge might be important for humanity. Isabella nodded. We'll continue the research, I promise. And you'll take care of each other? Kieran asked, looking at both of them. David and Isabella looked at each other across Kieran's bed. They had been through so much together already, the shock of learning about alien life, the joy of Kieran and Isabella's relationship, and now the heartbreak of losing him. They had become family through these shared experiences. We'll take care of each other, Isabella said finally. We promise, David added. Kieran closed his eyes, looking more peaceful than he had in months. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me the most beautiful life I could have ever imagined. 2 weeks later, on a clear morning when the first signs of spring were beginning to show, Kieran passed away peacefully in his sleep. David and Isabella were by his side, holding his hands as he took his final breath. They buried him in a quiet cemetery outside of town, with a simple headstone that read, Beloved husband and friend. He showed us that love knows no boundaries. As they stood by his grave that day, David and Isabella realized that their journey together was just beginning. They had made a promise to a dying friend, but more than that, they had committed to honoring the love and friendship that had brought them all together. The universe had given them an extraordinary gift in Kieran, and now it was their responsibility to make sure the gift lived on through them. 6 months had passed since Kieran's funeral, and the silence in the house felt overwhelming. Isabella had tried to return to her normal routine, but everything reminded her of her husband. The coffee mug he used every morning still sat in the kitchen cabinet. His research notes were scattered across the desk in their home office. Even the telescope in the backyard, which they had used together to look at the stars, now felt like a monument to everything she had lost. David visited every few days, bringing groceries and checking on Isabella, but their interactions felt awkward and forced. They were both grieving, but they didn't know how to grieve together. The weight of Kieran's final request hung between them like an invisible wall. I don't think I can do this, Isabella said one evening as they sat in the living room, picking at the dinner David had brought over. Kieran made it sound so simple, but nothing about this feels right. David set down his fork and looked at her. What doesn't feel right? This, Isabella said, gesturing between them. Us trying to be something we're not. Kieran was my husband, and you were his best friend. We can't just rearrange ourselves into some new configuration because that's what he wanted. David nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. I feel like I'm trying to fill a space that was never meant for me. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Isabella spoke again. But I also think about what he said, about not being alone, about taking care of each other. She paused. I miss having someone to talk to about him. You're the only other person who knew who he really was. I miss that too, David admitted. I miss talking about the crazy things he used to say, or the way he would get excited about discovering something new. Over the following weeks, David and Isabella began to find a different rhythm. Instead of trying to force themselves into the roles Kieran had imagined for them, They started simply being friends who were helping each other. Through the hardest time of their lives, they began having dinner together twice a week. Not because they felt obligated to, but because neither of them wanted to eat alone. They would share stories about Kieran, laugh about his quirks, and sometimes cry together when the grief felt too heavy to bear alone. He used to get so frustrated with human movies, Isabella said one evening, smiling through her tears. He couldn't understand why people in horror films always split up when they should stick together. David laughed. Remember when he tried to fix our toaster with alien technology and ended up burning down half the kitchen? He was so proud of himself until he realized what he had done, Isabella added. Then he spent 3 days researching human appliances, so it would never happen again. These conversations became a lifeline for both of them. They discovered that sharing their grief made it more bearable, and remembering Kieran's joy brought light back into their dark world. As autumn arrived, they decided to tackle Kieran's research together. His notes were written in a combination of English and symbols from his home world, and it took both of their expertise to decode everything he had documented about his species and their technology. Look at this, Isabella said one evening, pointing to a page covered in Kieran's careful handwriting. He was working on a way to communicate across vast distances in space. If we could finish this research, it could revolutionize human understanding of the universe. David leaned over her shoulder to read the notes. He always said that knowledge should be shared when the time was right. Maybe that time is coming. Working together on Kieran's research gave them a sense of purpose they had both been missing. They spent hours in the home office, translating his notes, building on his theories, and slowly piecing together the incredible legacy he had left behind. As they worked side by side, their relationship began to evolve naturally. They weren't trying to replace what they had lost, but they were building something new, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep understanding. One snowy evening in December, as they sat by the fireplace reviewing research notes, Isabella looked up at David. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Kieran knew this would happen? That we would become whatever we're becoming? David considered the question carefully. I think Kieran understood human nature better than we gave him credit for. He knew that grief shared as grief lessened. He knew that we both had so much love to give, and that love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. Isabella nodded. I keep waiting to feel guilty about caring for you, but I don't. It feels like a natural extension of loving him. I know what you mean, David said. It's not that I love you the same way I loved him, or the same way he loved you. It's different, but it's real. Over the next few months, their relationship continued to deepen. They celebrated Isabella's birthday together, spent holidays as a family of two, and supported each other through the difficult anniversaries and milestones that came with grief. When spring arrived, exactly 1 year after Kieran's death, they made a decision that surprised them both. I've been thinking, Isabella said as they walked through the cemetery where Kieran was buried, about what he said, about not being alone. What about it? I think he was right, but not in the way he imagined. I don't think he wanted us to get married because of some alien tradition. I think he wanted us to find our own way to be happy. David stopped walking and turned to face her. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, David. Not because Kieran told me to, and not because I'm trying to replace what I had with him. I love you because you've shown me that it's possible to find joy again after losing everything. David felt his heart racing. Isabella, I love you too. But are you sure this is what you want? Are you sure you're not just lonely? Isabella smiled. The first truly happy smile David had seen from her in a year. I'm sure. I've spent months thinking about this, talking to Kieran's grave, and trying to understand my own feelings. What I feel for you is real, and it's separate from what I felt for him. They were married 6 months later, in the same backyard where Kieran and Isabella had exchanged vows years earlier. It was a small ceremony with just a few close friends, but it felt right. They weren't trying to recreate the past, they were building something entirely new. Together, they established the Kieran Foundation. a research organization dedicated to the peaceful study of extraterrestrial life. They used Kieran's wealth and research to fund scientific expeditions, support young researchers, and slowly prepare humanity for the day when contact with other civilizations might become a reality. Do you think he would be proud of what we've built? Isabella asked one evening as they sat on their back porch, looking up at the stars. I think he would be amazed, David replied. Not just by the foundation, but by us. By the fact that we found a way to honor his memory while still living our own lives. Isabella leaned against David's shoulder. Sometimes I feel like he's still here, guiding us somehow. Maybe he is, David said softly. Maybe love really is strong enough to cross any distance, even the distance between life and death. As they sat together under the vast night sky, they thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started as strangers brought together by an alien crash landing, had become family through love and loss, and had found their way to a happiness they never could have imagined. Somewhere among the stars, they liked to believe, Kieran was watching over them with the same gentle smile he had worn in life, proud that his two favorite people had found a way to take care of each other and continue the work that had meant so much to him. The universe, it seemed, had a way of bringing people together when they needed each other most. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, love really could transcend every boundary, even the ones between worlds, between species, and between the past and the future. Their story was proof that the most beautiful relationships aren't always the ones we plan for, but the ones that grow naturally from seeds of friendship, trust, and mutual care. In the end, Kieran's greatest gift to them wasn't his wealth or his knowledge, it was showing them that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force in any universe.